Hey YouTube, Alex here, and in today's video I'm on the campus of Silliman University, and I have been getting a lot of questions. Alex, you're pretty young, I'm 32 years old. You're too young to retire, you're too young to not be working. What are you gonna do? How are you gonna avoid going broke? And I came up with some ideas besides just being an influencer, which has been fun, and I intend to continue doing it, but I also want to address some ideas that I have that are practical, right? Because being an influencer can end at any time. The platforms could decide to end the programs. I could get tired of getting recognized in public. I have had a few ideas since I am looking like I washed out of the tech industry, where it's been a year and a half since I've worked in tech, and I don't know that I'm gonna get back in without getting some education. Even a lot of fresh grads right now with tech skills can't get education. That's a whole basket of worms I'm not going to get into in this video. But my thought process was, my mom's first degree was in psychology, second was accounting, and then later she went back for a nursing degree. And I thought, what about nursing? I've got a bachelor's degree, and the Philippines is world famous for exporting healthcare talent. You see this in the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. Many countries have Filipino healthcare workers. They tend to be very caring and warm-hearted people from my observation. And so the country has a lot of infrastructure to train healthcare talent. You have a lot of great educational institutions here, and I thought, well, I'm in Dumaguete. There are like 4 or 5 colleges here. Why don't I apply to Silliman? So I thought I'd just put this out there, see what you guys think. What do you think about the idea of me applying to Silliman, where we are standing right now, for their nursing program? Their nursing school tuition is far less than the tuition in the US. And I wouldn't have to take out a bunch of debt. I could pay cash, not even really think about it, to be honest, compared to US pricing. I wouldn't be accumulating a bunch of debt that I'd be worried about quickly paying off. I'd graduate without any debt. Then I'd be responsible for taking the NCLEX exam, passing the NCLEX exam, which would allow me licensure to practice in the United States. And you know, I know a lot of people are saying, why not come back to the US? That seems to be some of the most useless advice I get on this channel, is just come back to the US. I guess they're thinking I'm gonna move into their house and eat their food. You gotta make a lot of money to survive in the US these days. I think 100K minimum, unless you own your own house and a bunch of assets, you collect a pension, then you really gotta have some dough. And so I thought, well, what about going back for nursing and coming out in California with an RN? You can make 100 to 140K per year. And I'm sure that number goes up with experience, and probably more toward the 140 as you get more experience. Then you could probably get promoted to management roles later on and make even more money. Of course, you got more headaches, more responsibility. But I think that educational tourism is going to be more and more of a thing in the future as Americans move on from this student loan debacle and they get tired of the sky-high tuition fees in the US that don't offer a great return on investment. Some of them, I think, are going to think, why can't I just study in a more budget-friendly location that's covering a lot of the same material? I mean, let's be real here. Silliman is an American university to some extent in the Philippines. At least it was founded by Americans, and is considered one of the most prestigious universities in the country. To get this caliber of education while paying for a more modest cost of living, not being so hyper-stressed about how am I going to pay rent, oh, I've got to work full-time while I go to college, resulting in poorer grades and not being able to make connections and get internships, that kind of thing. With this method, I don't see why I couldn't, assuming I go through the application process, I'm accepted, I start, which the earliest admission date would be the fall. I go through the program for a couple of years, I finish, and I go back to the US with no debt, with a quality nursing education, with connections, right? Because I specifically asked the counselor, and I should have recorded that, but I don't know if she would have been comfortable with that. Maybe I can interview her. Maybe I could come back here to Silliman and interview her about international students and how international students could apply to Silliman, because it's such a great institution. Anyway, you know, come here, get the education, then go back. I'm sure they have connections to hospitals back in the US, anywhere where there's a large Philam community, cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City, like anywhere where there's a lot of Filipinos. I'm sure there are connections to hospitals in those areas. There's probably an alumni network that you have access to if you graduate from here. The tuition is like 50K pesos per semester, about $900 per semester. My monthly expenses here run like $600 a month. So, you know, you're talking, even if we round up, substantially, we're talking like under $30,000 for 2 years of living expenses, tuition, and incidentals, like, you know, having some extra for emergencies. It just seems like a no-brainer. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Is this something you've thought about? I know Mark Walters from Walters World, one of my favorite YouTube channels. He studied in Portugal. He also studied in Brazil and Argentina. He's taught in China. He's taught in Germany as well, I think. So he's really an international man. And I'm curious if anybody else has had this experience of studying abroad, whether it be for budget reasons. I happen to enjoy the Philippines. I think it's a beautiful country. But also there's a lot of great opportunities here for Americans looking to reskill or retrain. And this campus is beautiful. If you've seen this video or some videos I've done recently where I show this campus, it's gorgeous. And I see the reviews for it. People seem to really like studying here. I know some people have pointed out, oh, how can you be sure the education is legit? Well, I've worked with a lot of immigrants in the US who did not go to college in the US, and at least not for undergrad, right? And their credentials were accepted because they often went to really high quality universities overseas. Going to Silliman is not the same as going to Chattahoochee State. No offense to anybody from Georgia who went to Chattahoochee State. That's not a real college, by the way. But you know, these institutions are well funded. They want to see their students succeed. They know that students going abroad and earning a solid income helps their country. It also helps to encourage other students looking to study abroad to come here to study and then to be able to go abroad with a quality education. The US can't have it both ways. You can't have all these people beholden in student loans, attract all these people from other countries to work there, and then simultaneously say, oh no, you can't study abroad, Americans, you've got to study here, accrue a bunch of debt, and then not be able to get a job to pay the debt back. It's one or the other. It's either universities overseas are acceptable and we'll hire students from over there, or they're not acceptable and we won't. You can't have it both ways. I mean, you go anywhere in the US, it's an undesirable place to live, and a good chunk of the healthcare professionals, if not all, will be from other countries, because many educated people don't want to live in Podunk, Arkansas, or Billy Bob, West Virginia. They've got to recruit people from other countries. The appeal of a much higher wage is so strong. They'll live in these off the beaten path places with no real connection to that place, may not have the food that they're used to eating. That's just the nature of the aging Western society, is that they've got to recruit talent from abroad, and they're not going to just give these people free education at American institutions because it's super expensive to run an American college. I think there's a reason why so many American universities are going out of business or consolidating programs, and that's because they're not a good deal anymore and they aren't sustainable. And what they charge versus the result that you're going to get coming out, I can attest to this from my own experience. I didn't get a great ROI. Now, some people will say you got a useless degree. Now those same people are backpedaling, why won't Elon hire my kid? I'm not trying to get too political here, but I think there is a valid case to be made. Do you know anyone who has studied medicine, nursing, anything really overseas, and then taken that education back to the States to earn the big bucks, to justify the effort required to attain that education. I think this has the potential to be another one of those dirty secrets in the US, like medical tourism, where people no longer see a point in paying top dollar for results that aren't top dollar, and evaluating educational opportunities based on potential outcomes, and not just because they feel good, but because, wow, I spend X amount and then I get this much back in a potential nursing career. Nursing is not the most glamorous profession, but it's solid in terms of necessity, right? With an aging population, I think demand for nurses is only going to go up, and salaries should stay pretty strong unless they totally drop the barrier to entry, unless they just totally open the floodgates. Then nurses should be making good money for years to come. On the other hand, do you think it's a bad idea? I mean, I do think a lot of professors may not like it, American professors. They may feel like, wow, you're skipping over paying me basically because you can go do your education over there, and then you don't have to pay the sky-high tuition prices. You don't have to pay for all this administrative staff. You still get a quality education, and then you come back, right? And there's a cultural component. You get exposure to a different culture. You get to see things from a different perspective. If you're paying for room and board has gone up a lot in US college towns. Rents have doubled in the college town I lived in when I went to college the first time around. And I can't tell that they've made upgrades justifying the doubling of price. So to come here to the Philippines, where I can live in a place I like, around friendly people, I can focus on my studies, I don't have as many distractions. I'm here at another campus to record the next part of this video. One of the advantages I could see to not studying in the US is not having to be around other students as a non-traditional student. I remember when I was in college the first time around, we had this guy come and live in our student house. It wasn't a dorm style housing, but it was like apartments right next to campus. And he would go down there to the office every day complaining about all kinds of stuff. And eventually they were like, dude, you're 30 something. Why are you coming down here and complaining about how 20-year-olds behave? And I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy that can't adjust to life as a non-traditional student. I get it. 30-something-year-olds are not typical for nursing education. To have to be around young American students, to have to live around them, that just sounds like a lot of headache and hassle. The attitude that they might have, the tendency to want to have a good time. I know that a lot of colleges in the US, the graduation rates are not spectacular, especially you get outside the top 10 or 20 universities, especially the top 50, I think. Then you're talking like a third graduate. It's not the best environment to be around. We're here in Dumaguete. I can live downtown. I don't have to live around other students. I don't have to live in a dorm or dorm-like setting. I have my own privacy. I have my own space. And I still get the education, right? I can still live in proximity to the university, but I'm not dealing with some of those downsides that come with being around non-students or students who aren't very serious, because as a non-traditional student, I'm taking time away. I could be presumably working, I could be saving money, I could be doing something else with my time. And I don't want to waste time dealing with people. Oh, hey man, I really, I need to sleep tonight because I got an exam early. Oh, who cares about your exam, man? That doesn't matter. I've had that experience in the past, and I found it to be a colossal waste of time and money. And I don't want to repeat that experience. Part of the reason that healthcare professionals in the US get paid so much is because the standard is so high. The reality of healthcare in the US is that the US is extremely litigious. So any little mistake that you make as a healthcare professional is going to be heavily scrutinized. It could potentially result in a lawsuit, potentially result in the loss of your license. So you need to be having all cylinders firing when you're studying. You need to be paying attention every single step of the way. You need to be very, very careful about paying attention in your classes, your coursework, because there is less margin for error as a healthcare professional. If you make a major mistake because, oh, I just wasn't paying attention during that lesson, or I didn't sleep well the night before, or I skipped that class because I just didn't feel like going, that could result in very serious consequences for other people. I tend to believe that being away from the chaos that is in the US, the chaos that the US seems to have descended into, could be beneficial for a student. When I'm in the US, it seems like there's this outrage culture that impacts students. Oh, campus protests this and campus protests that. And I'm not saying people shouldn't care, but I find that people in the US these days are often wrapped up getting upset about things they have no control over. And that's something I tend to really enjoy about here in the Philippines, is that people seem to focus on what they have autonomy over or what they can control. It's part of why I find Filipinos to be so resilient, is that they're not always worked up about random junk or garbage. They seem to be more focused in some ways. The students here seem to be more focused than American students. I don't often hear about the students misusing the opportunity because college is so expensive, because families have to make so many sacrifices for a student to go to college. It's taken really seriously, at least here in Dumaguete, from what I've noticed. A lot of students really try hard and work hard to understand the material, and they sacrifice a lot of other things to make sure they're succeeding in their classes. And so being in Asia, I think, would be really interesting, because I think we're seeing Asia rising, and I think we're seeing a lot of these countries grow and improve. And I think some of that growth and improvement is a consequence of resource scarcity. The idea of a party college just doesn't really seem to make sense here, where I went to a party school in the US. Most of the colleges in Tennessee are what I would call party schools, with the exception of a few universities. Most people are going there to have a good time. I think that's why you see so many people drop out. I think that's why you see so many people get irrelevant degrees. And yeah, so let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you think it's a good idea to study abroad and then come back to the US with the education but minus the debt, still be qualified, assuming you can pass the exam requirement, which I figure Silliman is going to do a great job to prepare students to pass those exams, because it's expensive, right? I mean, by Philippine standards, it's a pricey university, especially when you consider the opportunity cost and the time, the room and board costs. Then it's not a cheap university to attend when you look at the full package. Everything I've heard about the university is fantastic. Maybe you know somebody in the US or Canada or Australia, if you're in one of those countries or you're from one of those countries, that did their education abroad and it really turned out to be beneficial for them, their pocketbook, and their future. Maybe you disagree. Let me know if you disagree down in the comments. I'm always interested to get your perspective. Next, give us a thumbs up. It helps with the YouTube algorithm. And finally, please subscribe to the channel down below if you want to see more content like this, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.